and this series is Moldylocks and the Three Clares. Let's go. Chapter 1. High up in the clouds, at the top of a tangled beanstalk, there was an enormous castle. It was owned by a very ugly giant called Moldylocks, who lived all alone, apart from his big fat hand, which laid piles of golden eggs. One evening, Moldylocks was sitting in front of the fire polishing his gold coins, when he said to the hand, A giant needs a wife. I am going to find myself a wife." "Cluck, blop," said the hand, as she laid another egg. The next morning, Moldylocks brushed his hair for the first time in years, and slid down the beanstalk. When he reached the bottom, he set off along the road toward the nearby village. As soon as they saw him coming, the villagers were terrified. They ran into their house and bolted their doors. The giant rapped on one door after another. Nobody answered. "Come out!" he moaned. "I am only looking for someone to be my wife." But everyone stayed hidden inside, quacking in their boots. "Be like that," growled the giant. "You don't know what you're missing." Then he stomped off. It wasn't long before Moldylocks came to an old bridge, which led to some woods. Ahead of him, along a narrow path, he could see 3 cottages. The first cottage was big, the second was tiny, and the third was medium-sized. At the beginning of the path was a sign which read, "Here live the 3 Clares." "Aha!" said Moldylocks. 3 Clares. Perhaps one of them will be my wife." He went to the big cottage. Sunflowers and hollyhocks were growing in the garden. Then there was a pile of logs by the door, and loud music was blaring from. "Excellent," said the giant to himself. "A woman who grows big flowers, chops low and like loud music will suit me well." He knocked loudly on the door. After a few moments, a large woman with a big pink nose poked her head out of a window. "Who's that knocking so loudly on my door?" she said. "I am Moldylocks," said the giant. "You can say that again," said the woman. "I am Moldylocks," repeated the giant. "I live in an enormous castle and have a wife." "Eh?" said the woman. "I am Great Big Clare, an enormous castle and riches beyond my wildest dreams. Sounds good to me." "Then come back with me now," said Moldylocks, thinking how lucky he was to have found such an ample woman. Great Big Clare wasn't sure how lucky she was to have found such a moldy giant, but she didn't need to be asked twice. She ran down the stairs, grabbed hold of the giant's hand. Then they marched back along the road and up the beanstalk together. Chapter 3. Great Big Clare couldn't believe her eyes when she entered the giant castle. There's more gold on the lid of your teapot than in the whole of my cottage, she said, and she was happy to think that soon it would all belong to her. Within minutes, she had moved her clothes into the giant wardrobe and made herself at home. Goldilocks wasn't happy with Great Big Clara. He quickly discovered that she was bossy. She snored. The porridge she made had lump in it. She stood in front of the mirror plucking hair from her chin. She refused to chop the log. The final straw was when the turfed him out of his coffee chair, sat in it herself, and forced him to sit on a stool. Goldilocks ceased all night long. Then the next morning he said, "Great Big Clara, I do not want you for my wife. You must go down the beanstalk and never come back again." Great Big Clara cried and shouted and stamped her feet, but Goldilocks would not change his mind. So she climbed down the beanstalk and stomped all the way back to her cottage. Chapter 4. A few weeks later, Goldilocks was playing tiddlywinks with his gold coins, and he said to his hen, "I am going to try again to find our wife." "Cluck blop," said the hen, as she set another egg. The giant put on his very best clothes, polished his boots for the first time ever, slid down the beanstalk, and set off along the road to the village. Once again the village ran inside their houses, bottling their doors behind them. Goldilocks didn't care. He kept on going until he reached the path at the edge of woods. He walked straight past Great Big Clara's cottage and on the next. The tiny little cottage had a tiny little garden full of tiny little flowers. Piccolo music drifted out through the open window, and there was a delicious smell of cakes. Said the giant to himself. "It's a long time since anyone baked me a cake." He bent down and leapt on the front door. After a few moments, it was opened by the tiny little woman. "Mind you don't knock my door down," she said, but she smiled at him sweetly. "I am Goldilocks," said the giant. "I live in an enormous castle and I have riches beyond your wildest dreams. I am looking for a wife." "I am tiny wee Clara," said the woman. "I have heard all about you from my sister. She is a fool. If she could not make you happy, I will be a better wife." Goldilocks was delighted, even if she was a bit small, so he picked her up and carried her back to his castle. Chapter 5. Tiny wee Clara couldn't believe her eyes when she saw such wealth. "There is more gold on the handle of your toilet than in the whole of my tiny little cottage," she said, and she was happy to think that one day it would all belong to her. She quickly set about making herself at home, covered his shelves with tiny little knickknacks. Goldilocks wasn't happy with tiny wee Clara. He soon discovered that. She was only big enough to chop twigs. She grew daisies in his egg cups. The cupcakes she baked were the size of sugar lumps. It was too small to make the bed. He kept losing her. When she nearly drowned learning his best, Goldilocks had enough. "Tiny wee Clara," he said the next morning, "I do not want you for my wife. You must go down the beanstalk and never come back again." Tiny wee Clara squeaked and squealed and burst into tears. But Goldilocks would not change his mind, so she went down the beanstalk, which took a very long time, and cried all the way back home. Chapter 6. A few weeks later, Goldilocks was playing carpet bowls with his gold coins, when he said to his hen, "I am going to have one last try at finding a wife." "Cluck blop," said the hen as she laid another egg. The giant put on his very, very best clothes, shaved himself, which was possibly a mistake, slid down the beanstalk and set off along the road. He stumped straight through the village, across the old bridge into the woods, and past the first two cottages. When he reached a medium-sized cottage, he was pleased to see smoke billowing from the chimney. The garden was mostly decking with a few bushes dotted about. A rich smell of roasting meat came through the windows. "Who needs cakes if there's a roast on offer?" he grinned. Goldilocks knocked on the door. After a few moments, it was opened by a not too tall, not too short, not too fat, not too thin woman. "Can I help you?" she asked. Goldilocks stared at her and was pleased with what he saw. "I am Goldilocks," he said. "I live in an enormous castle and have riches beyond your wildest dreams. I am looking for a wife." "I am medium size Clara," said the woman. "I had heard all about you from my sister, but I like to make up my own mind about things. I will come with you and see how we get on." Goldilocks was delighted apart from anything else. Medium-sized Clara was much better looking than her sister. He took her gently by the hand and led her back to his castle. Chapter 7. Medium-sized Clara couldn't believe her eyes when he saw the giant gold. "You have all the riches in the world," she said. "What can I do to make you happy?" Over the next few weeks, medium-sized Clara chopped wood and cooked and cleaned and laid fires and trimmed the beanstalk. She didn't snore and she didn't pluck hairs from her chin. She didn't grow things in his teacups and she kept getting lost. She made the best porridge Goldilocks had ever tasted in his life, and she made the bed so well that he slept like a tree trunk. Goldilocks was so happy that one morning he said to his hen, "Medium-sized Clara is the perfect wife for me. I am going to marry her. Cluck blop, said the hen, as she laid another egg. Goldilocks found medium-sized Clara standing at the top of the beanstalk, gazing down to the ground below. Medium-sized Clara, he said, you know how to make me happy. I will have you as medium-sized. Clara looked at him in astonishment. Giant Goldilocks, she said, I wouldn't be your wife if you gave me all the gold in the world. Not once have you asked me what you can do to make me happy. Not once have you lifted a finger to help me. Not once have you said thank you. I would rather be poor for the rest of my days and than stay here with you. With that, she Goldilocks bellowed and barked and thundered around, but medium-sized Clara didn't even look back. After one last howl of anger, the giant stormed back into his castle, sat down in front of his gold, and began to count it. Bah! He gurgled. Who needs a wife anyway? Cluck blop, said the hen, and she laid another egg. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.